Speaking of Europe, we will have a lot to speak about Europe later. But before we move on to that story, I think that in our private messages, in our group chats, you've talked about the Canadian dairy industry a lot. And since we have a little bit more time than I expected today, because a few people didn't show up to this today's episode, I just want to kind of maybe pick your brain a little, right? So last week, I think, or the week before, we've talked about a lot of how Canada should and could deal with the Trump tariffs in different ways and stuff, and we kind of explored the idea of maybe we should not do retaliatory tariffs. And by the way, before people accuse us of being right-wing conservative shills, the conservatives in Canada are actually also talking about doing dollar for dollar retaliatory tariffs. So this is something that actually all the major parties pretty much agree upon. But maybe we, as the Zillennial money crew, disagree on, because it's like, if we're gonna fight the Americans on a trade war, if we want to continue this fight for longer, maybe we should not uh, retaliate in terms of tariffs, because that means that we'll be taxing our own citizens when we're buying American goods. And why not just buy cheap American goods so that we can keep our cost of living down, and then we can survive the economic turmoil of the American tariffs for longer, right? So that's, I know the emotional response for people is to do these retaliatory tariffs when maybe long term is unwise. So that was the first thing that we talked about. And then the second thing we talked about is, as I mentioned earlier, the dairy tariffs. I think that Trump himself actually brought that up as a major point of contention, where he wants to, he's saying that Canada is making so much of like the steel and aluminum that we could make here in America, and why are we buying it from them, and they're like ripping us off and all that stuff. And when we try to sell dairy to Canada, they tariff us at 250% or whatever it is. There is like a quotas, right? So I think it's like you can Canada can import up to like a certain amount without tariffs, but then if it goes over that quota, then there are tariffs. So it's not like 250% for everything, but still, right? Like at some point it does hit the limit, and then Canadian dairy is being protected in that way. And Sunil, I know you have some opinions about our dairy industry, so I'm going to give you an opportunity to respond to that. And lastly, you did bring up that fact that Carney is thinking of going to Europe to talk with European leaders as his kind of first act as prime minister. And you said earlier that, in your opinion, that's not the right move. So, what is the right move? Like, what would you do if you were prime minister, or, if Pierre got elected, and what would you say? What would you like to see him do? Or what would you do if you were the prime minister, instead of going to Europe and discussing this with European leaders? Would you go to, try to negotiate with Trump more, or would you go somewhere else? Or what's your opinion on that? So 3 parts, and I hope you wrote them down, because I don't even remember my own questions.
Well, I'll go with the Mark Carney part first. I mean, like, first of all, I'll just address, like, I think he's probably a better choice than Justin Trudeau, like, because he's still a technocrat. I think that there's some benefit to having a technocrat in office right now. I just don't. But like, in terms of like this move to like go to Europe, I just don't think it's the right priority right now. I think Canada is choosing to like stand up for this like idea of like global order and these like world governance organizations, and they want to have like a good relationship with Europe. But I think we just have to be kind of more pragmatic. And like, I'm looking at your chart right now, and Europe basically doesn't register on this chart for like exports for Canada. Like, it's just not our worry right now. We're an export economy. We move 78% of our goods to the United States. They are attacking us. They're bullying us because they can. It's a negotiating tactic. I don't like, a lot of people want to talk about this from the perspective the tariffs are going to stay forever. I don't believe that's going to happen. To a certain point, I would be calling the U.S.'s bluff, and I think that I would not be instituting dollar for dollar tariffs. I think I would actually encourage Canada. I would actually be talking about this from the perspective that like uh, by like temporarily even lowering our tariffs on steel and aluminum, we're actually making Canadian industry more competitive. I would probably not engage in like acts what could be considered acts of war, such as like cutting out their electricity and stuff, because they can engage in a lot of acts of war against us. Like they can cut off our gasoline supply because we refine it down there. So I just don't think that's a wise move to be. And it seems like even like the commentary between when the Howard Lutnick came out, it seemed like they were surprised by how hard Doug Ford went. Like it seemed like even there was an acknowledgement, let's like lower the temperature a little bit. So I just think at this point in time, I would not be focusing on Europe. I wouldn't be focusing on Ukraine. I wouldn't be coming out with speeches and in the first line calling, making allegations about Trump being like a Russian stooge. I would actually be a little bit more respectful of Trump because he is the president of the United States, whether we like him or not. And in the end, I would probably be focusing in I guess like I don't know that how the job would work from time to time, but I think I would definitely be focusing on uh, a balance between threatening very specific products, but not this situation where Canada's I feel like is digging itself a hole. Like I just think we have to be realistic how we talk about it too, because we're getting our country all worked up. We're getting people all upset. People are saying crazy things like, "Oh, we don't even need the United States. We could just sell to other countries," and they have no idea how reliant we are on this relationship. So I would just kind of like call Trump's bluff, let him do his loudmouth stuff, and in the end, it's probably gonna settle itself out in a couple of months when they make our premier sit down. And I guess we have to be prepared for what areas of the economy Trump is gonna change our relationship with. Like if Trump basically says, get rid of the steel and aluminum tariffs, I'll let you keep supply management, we should be ready to take a deal like that. Um, in terms of the conversation around supply management, I guess it just comes up a lot because it's like a really good example where Canada actually uses tariffs to like protect our industry, like protect local farmers and protect our food industry. But it's a way of like basically uh, we're not protecting necessarily like small like farmers with like 3 or 4 cows. Like these are still fairly big farms. We're protecting a dairy cartel, and we're essentially protecting a corporate milk cartel. And cartels are just bad for consumers. So in a sense, we are using our asymmetric tariffs to protect Canadian oligopolies that are gouging Canadians, where Canadians pay like double the price for dairy in dairy products than most other countries in like the G7. So we're making Canadians pay more money for things like cheese, milk, and butter only because we want to protect a cartel. And I just don't think that's good economics. And I just think long term it's not sustainable, and we probably need to modernize this system, and we probably need to stop making. We probably need to stop engaging in like crony capitalism, where we care more about cartels than our consumers, because our consumers are people. And when you like put an artificial tax on something like dairy, or butter, which are like these are like important goods. These are goods people need to survive. Um, I mean, unless you're lactose intolerant, but these are still like staples, and putting a tax on staples is like a tax on the poor. So I think that there's like a way of like even arguing that like the way that we protect our dairy cartel is actually taxing the poor in Canada.